Hey, what's up, guys? For today's video, I wanted to give my current perspective on gooner culture. And though I think it's cringe to self identify as one, I'm also going to be talking about my experiences with that. I also want to bring up spirituality and religion as potential solutions to this problem, because I know a lot of faiths view this as immoral behavior. I think this video is going to contrast from a previous commentary where I discussed my experience with No Nut November and NoFap, which, if you don't know what those concepts are, it basically boils down to abstaining from masturbation and watching adult content. And hopefully, I won't just be repeating the same stuff I said then, but it is one of my lowest viewed videos, anyways. But as the title suggests, I have given up on doing NoFap. I pretty much stopped as soon as December started, and I don't have any plans to try again. Not because I think it's stupid or a waste of time, I just don't have a legitimate reason to abstain anymore, because in my experience, any benefit you get is pretty much placebo. And I was rather judgmental of people who do nofap. I call them a bunch of copers. But honestly, in my current mindset, you have my respect if you manage to stick with that for more than a month. I will say the reason I couldn't keep going with it is the same reason I give up on most things in life, which is I just fundamentally lack a lot of self discipline and strongly utilize my external environment as a source of motivation. And being at home with no purpose or goals has driven me to engage in a lot of short term hedonistic activity. I realize this is a very childish mentality, but for the essence of my decision making, it comes down to, do I want the free dopamine or not? And it's not that masturbating and consuming adult content isn't as harmful as things like alcohol or drugs, but that it manifests itself in more subtle ways. For example, it has more of an internal impact on the psyche and is expressed through things like how you perceive women or limiting your self control towards impulsive behavior. As for me, the constant encouragement and normalization of sexual content on the internet made me view this stuff regardless of my intentions from a pretty young age. And contrary to the title, at this moment in time, I haven't hit my bottom in terms of depravity when it comes to gooning, but it's still bad even if it's plateaued. And I won't get into the specifics of my current behavior, because for one, that's pretty gross. And secondly, I can only do so much when it comes to embarrassing myself on YouTube. I figure I have to draw the line somewhere. But if I had to pinpoint a general time where I'd say I was the most down bad, was between the end of high school and my first year of college, so roughly between the age of 18 and 19. This was probably because this was the first time in my life where I had to deal with not having much personal space and having to share things like a room or bathroom with strangers. And because I have the bare minimum levels of self awareness and respect for others, I'm not about to start jacking off. Even if there wasn't anyone around, I'm still technically in a shared space. But after I moved off campus the following semester, I ended up living in my dad's apartment. And since he traveled a lot for work, I pretty much had the place to myself for a couple of days at a time. And I would say the most gooner thing I've done was pay for OnlyFans. And saying that by itself doesn't seem that bad, but I had multiple subscriptions and it wasn't the only platform I used because I was also listening to a bunch of erotic ASMR content too, so I was paying for that as well. Honestly, I don't even remember how much I was paying every month, but I was juggling at least a dozen different payments between all the creators I was following, and it wasn't even post-nut clarity or some revelation that made me stop, but because I was moving back onto campus the following year. So I ended up canceling every subscription and deleted all my accounts. And looking back, I genuinely do not know what I was thinking. With my current mindset, I don't know how anybody could be paying for that stuff for more than a week before realizing how much of a waste of money it is. But for the rest of my time throughout school, I lived on campus with other people, so I was limiting my degenerate behavior for when I was on break. But now that I live at home for the foreseeable future and haven't really socialized with anyone but my immediate family, I'm regressing into more hedonistic stuff to cope. And it shouldn't be a surprise that when you couple feelings of isolation and loneliness with using the internet as your main social outlet, it's a recipe for disaster, especially when it comes to how young people view sex and relationships now. And I only see this issue worsening due to things like the rise in short form algorithmic content, normalizing online sex work and parasocial relationships, along with the decline in real life social events. Though I make all these observations as a hypocrite and a willing participant in the system, though it's not like I can offer any real solutions to this, since these problems are at a societal level. See, this is where being able to stick through NoFap would have come in handy, because then I could actually offer some insight on whether or not it has any benefits in the long term. But I already gave my thoughts on the NoFap community in my other video, So I'm going to talk more about spirituality and religion as potential remedies. Though don't expect any profound analysis, as I don't have that much experience with religion, but I will be talking about it within the context of helping people to stop gooning. And saying this as a secular person, having a religion to follow seems like a fairly effective approach because it can be applied to pretty much any moral dilemma people might have. I mean, this might be a poor assumption, but I feel like most religious doctrines are rather binary when it comes to individual actions or habits being morally good or bad. What I'm trying to get at is that it simplifies the decision making process as you're closing the gap between the moral ambiguity of your actions and providing a more clear answer. And spirituality likely has a similar effect, but to a lesser extent, because you're relying on your own intuition to help guide you through your actions. But there's always the clarification that I'm talking about these things in an ideal manner, as the biggest impact is going to be the individual's interpretation. As for me, why I'm not a religious or spiritual person is that I've never really resonated that strongly with whatever message is being presented to me, along with me having a relatively nihilistic view of the world, as many privileged young people do. But to connect the talk about religion to what I've been saying, because I've kind of gotten a bit off track here, is that I really don't have a comprehensive moral framework to evaluate whether or not it's worth it to stop jerking off and watching adult content, as I'm not relying on religion or spirituality to help guide through my internal conflicts. And the external boundaries I set on people are so much easier to define than the limits I impose on myself for how I should be treated. Though I suppose that's a universal problem because our internal viewpoint is vastly more complex, given the endless amount of information we have on ourselves. In other words, I'm basically just a bitch when it comes to nofap because I don't have the willpower or self respect. But if I somehow came over to religion or became more of a spiritual person, I think that'd give me a valid enough reason to quit my gooner lifestyle. Though now I want to shift topics a bit and talk about the consequences of gooning or just any hedonistic behavior broadly, but this might fall on deaf ears if my observations on the consumption of online sexual content are correct. But keep in mind, all this is anecdotal, so I'm not saying this will happen to you, but this is just my experience. The first general trend I noticed is that I'm terrible when it comes to talking or just interacting with women. I would say that I'm awkward around anyone I don't know well, but it's especially true when it comes to women my age. It's not that I'm overtly creepy or say weird shit in the conversation, I'm just hyper aware of my behavior, which leads me to basically being mute around them. I have managed to build a basic amount of social skills that I can engage in small talk or have a formal conversation with women, but anything longer than 15 minutes and I start to feel this overwhelming sense of discomfort. Another impact of gooning is that it really discourages you from wanting to pursue a relationship or just socialize in general, because it is a pretty extreme form of escapism, and if you've never had a girlfriend, like in my case, you start to become complacent to the whole idea. I'm not saying it's the only reason why I haven't been in a relationship, but it is definitely one of the main factors. And the last major drawback for me is that it creates feelings of self loathing and apathy, which kills a lot of motivation in areas like self improvement or discipline. Because you're in the cycle of chasing short term dopamine that deters you from doing stuff like planning for long term goals or activities that involve delayed gratification. I'm not saying that all my problems would be fixed, but these disadvantages have impacted me a lot, especially when I was in my teenage years, when I had more opportunities for socializing and just had more potential for my life. And that's the hard part of being unable to drop this, because I'm trying to rationalize my behavior saying stuff like, well, if I was really capable, or if I really wanted it badly enough, I would have stopped already. In truth, I do feel a bit guilty for doing all this self reflection when I know I don't have any intention of attempting nofap again, but it just seems like it won't make a huge difference. Like, there are more concrete areas of self improvement that I've been trying to work on, like exercise or limiting screen time, that have yielded benefits much faster. But I do realize at the end of the day, I can't keep gooning forever, especially now that I'm in my 20s, and I already mentioned how this behavior can snowball in many negative ways. I am a bit worried about how sexual content is becoming more sophisticated and dynamic, along with the integration of AI being able to further exploit the loneliness of our generation. As I know, especially for me, I've conveyed that I don't have much self-discipline or restraint in this area, but hopefully I can have my first relationship while I'm still in my 20s. And I don't want to be on my deathbed with the only relationship experience I've had being with an AI-powered sex doll, but hopefully I've learned my lesson when it comes to paying for stuff, as I mentioned with the whole OnlyFans thing. But I think I exhausted the main things I wanted to discuss when it comes to this topic, so that might be the video there. I think my next commentary will be centered around a specific personal experience, as I find those much easier to draft for, but hopefully this video still made some sense. Alright, thank you for sticking around if you managed to make it all the way, and I'll see you guys in the next one.